Alrighty, today I'm going to be doing a bunch of demonstrations and I'm also going to be reviewing some watercolor materials that were sent to me by Danny from Paul Rubens. This is an art supply company that reached out to me quite recently to send me some samples, and I also requested to try out this set of watercolors. They're the Xieyun watercolor set. Very interesting set. As you guys know, I'm a big fan of granulating paints. This is a 6-set tube of granulating paints, and the interesting thing about these is that they actually contain 2 colors in each tube. And the way this has been explained to me is that the 2 pigments in here have different densities, so when you mix a bit of water with the paint, you'll find that they separate out and one of them tends to float a little bit more and the other one sinks. So that creates some interesting granulation effects. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I think the best way to find out is to actually see how it appears on paper. See how the paint reacts with the water and go from there. I've not tried these yet, so I'm quite excited to see what actually comes out of it. So there's a few colors in here. There's 6 colors, and I actually like the fact that there's not so many. And often you get those beginners sets or what have you that just have so many colors, 20 to 30 different colors. And while they can be good, depending, if you have really good quality ones, a lot of the time I do find that those colors can be pretty chalky, or they just confuse beginners when they're painting because there's just too much choice. And we're going to test them out and see what the quality's like. So the colors are actually, I'll name them out. There's dark blue and green. So that's one tube. The second tube is purple and black. Third tube is purple and pink. Fourth tube, purple and blue. The fifth tube is blue and green. And the 6th tube is blue and dark green. So interesting. We'll see how they kind of granulate out. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of my own yellow. I've got some yellow ochre and perhaps a touch of neutral tint. I always have some neutral tint on the side. Maybe that's not necessary given some of these colors are pretty dark, but it'll be interesting to see how they actually perform. So, one thing I didn't mention is that it also comes with a little bottle here of oxgal. So, just bring it a little bit closer to the camera. You can see it here. It's a glass bottle. I've not used this stuff before, so this is interesting, and definitely something that I've not seen included in a watercolor set like this before. So, perhaps we can try a bit of it out later. What it basically does is that it just increases the dispersion of the color, so it increases the sort of spread of color. And some people like it, some people don't. I find that if the paint spreads too much, it can be a bit tricky to control. So we'll see how they perform by themselves first. I've never really had to add it to any paint before, but I think it's more of a personal preference. So these are the 6 paints. I'll just take them out and we'll squeeze them out on the palette here. I've actually got a tile that I picked up. Got a big set of these tiles from Bunnings, and this will just make it a lot easier. I have another palette on the right hand side, but that's just to pick up a bit of yellow, a bit of neutral tint if I need it. Primarily, I'm going to be using these colors. The one thing I would like to see perhaps is to have a yellow in this set, but I'm just so used to using yellow, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so let's start with this one on the left. It's very hard to often see what colors are in these tubes until you squeeze them out or actually wet them, because especially the darker ones can be very dark when you squeeze them out. So I can't really tell what color this is. Let's just squeeze out a bit here on the top and we'll leave that. Okay, I don't want to squeeze out too much. These are really filled right to the top. See, the paint's just starting to pop out a bit in a little squeeze. That's very thick. Sometimes you get paint that's fairly watery, and good to see that the concentration in these is quite good. Okay, that looks like a kind of a bluey sort of color. Could be blue and dark green, purple and blue. Hard to tell. Let's have a look. What's this one? Looks to be green or something. There, kind of greeny sort of color. Liking the look of them already. You can actually look at the back of the paint tubes and it tells you what the pigments are. So this one's PB29 and PY150. It's good that quite transparent with the pigments that they're using. It's really the least a company can do when they're using pigments. Squeeze out a bit of this stuff. Not sure what this one is. I think it's another green, one of the other green variations. Could be dark blue and green, but we'll see. I'm gonna have to swatch these out. And I'm being careful also to keep these in order, just to make sure, so I need to refill them again. I don't get confused, because yeah, there is a number on each of the pigments, and you can, this is 172, so you can probably go onto the website, find out what they are, but because the writing's in Chinese, it's going to be difficult for anyone who doesn't read Chinese basically to understand what the paint inside is. So, but it's good that you see there is obviously some labeling for the pigments and the paint color itself. Number. Okay. Could be a purple. It's very hard to see. It's good that they come out quite dark. I find that the darker that the paint comes out, even the yellows, when you squeeze out a bit of yellow ochre from another brand, you find that it comes out, you know, a fairly, very dark sort of yellow. And that can be an indication of the amount of pigment they actually use in that color. So I've got that all squeezed out now. I've got some mop brushes here. Now, this over on the left-hand side is the Paul Rubens watercolor paper block. So initially when I asked for this, I thought it was a sketchbook. It looks just like a sketchbook. And when I opened it up, I was quite surprised because it's basically a block. So it's just like a normal block of watercolor paper that's just been bound quite nicely. So it's kind of hard to see here, but basically there's a little space in here where you can put a palette knife or just anything in there to separate out the pages and pull them off. For those who haven't used blocks before, they're actually very useful when you're starting out painting, because you just don't have to tape down the edges of the page or anything like that. It's stuck straight into it. So I think that's a pretty cool little feature. But you know, I'm more used to using sketchbooks that are bound on the inside, and you know, so yeah, my preference, and I hope Paul Rubens also looks at making something like that, just a normal sketchbook, just with bound edges, with this premium paper as well. So this is 100% cotton hot press paper. So looks to be their best stuff. But yeah, I've not seen this style before. It's interesting, and you know, just think of it as a, I don't know, I guess like a fancy block. So I want to try out some swatches and go from there. So let's go ahead and start top left. I'm gonna figure out what colors these are. Using a normal mop brush. Okay. A bit of water in there. I'm just going to drop a bit in here and just see how it reacts to the paper. Interesting. This is again, this is hot press paper, so you're going to get a really smooth like sort of effect. Let me see if I can drop in a bit of darkness in there as well. Okay, something like that. So you have that darker bit of color spreading out on that right hand side. Really just get it as dark as I can to see the range of this pigment. It's always really important, I find, to make sure that, you know, especially when you're working with darker paints, that it can go from a really light to a really dark sort of pigment. That just allows you to paint all kinds of things, especially if you're painting trees. They're going to be leaves of different shades. So just having a look there, I think this must be the purple and black. Let's go for this next one here. Have a look. Yeah, that's really vibrant. So wish here be blue, probably blue and dark green. And it's reacting fairly well. Like I wouldn't say like I can tell the difference between this paint and say some other paint that I have, you know, another brand of watercolor paint. I do use 𝗪𝗑𝗦𝗧𝗏, use a whole bunch of different colors. From Daniel Smith as well. The good thing is that it seems very highly pigmented and very vibrant as well. So yeah, that's interesting to see. So that looks to be the purple. Let's go for this third one. Yeah, this is bring that across. And I think what's going to be interesting with these colors is when you actually mix them together, because I do a lot of my mixing on the actual paper itself, you're going to get some interesting effects with the colors just mixing together and creating some combinations that might look a bit different from the other paints that I've used. It tends to sort of dull down some of the colors as well when you mix them together. So let's have a look at this one here. Okay. The bluish green. Yeah, so this must be blue and green 171. When I have them next to each other, it's a lot easier to tell what they are. Okay, just trying to guess which ones they are, but this one in. Okay, so we'll go through the different colors. So this top one over here, that is 151, that's purple and black. Got this second one here, which is 161, purple and blue. Next one here is 121, which is dark blue and green. Got 172 here, which is dark green and blue. You have got 171 here, which is blue and green. And this last one here, probably the most, looks like the most vibrant of all, 152, purple and pink. So I'm really interested to see how these sort of dry off as well. But, you know, again, this paper that's been provided by Paul Rubens is smooth watercolor paper. You tend to see a lot more granulation on rough or medium textured paper. And I do have some of that paper with me to do a quick landscape after as well. Just going to play around with the what it does. Just some quick little trees or something that I can put in here. Mix the paint up a little bit as well. So it's definitely really good quality paint. And you can see just how it reacts with the paper as well. You're getting this really nice, soft, wet and wet effects on the paper. It's reacting how it should with cotton paper. These signs of granulation, you can see it just starting to dry. And the hues that are used here as well, I think they'll be fantastic for landscape painting. Lots of greens and muted purples and stuff that you can create from this. Even these two up the top here. Just mixing up a few different colors as well and just experimenting, see how they look. Bit of wet and wet effect there. Let's see what happens here. paper does stay dried for a bit of time, wet for a bit of time actually, which is good. And um, with paper that's obviously hot press as well, you tend to find this sort of thing happens sometimes. There'll be areas where the paper buckles a bit, and you'll just get some bits and pieces that dry faster than others. But so far, I'm really liking how these colors are turning out. I'm going to remove this sheet, and we can do a little painting. Okay, what I'll do is a little landscape sketch. Okay, just using the paints that I have here. I'm really thinking to mix in a little bit of yellow in here as well. I doubt that I'll need the neutral tint, but a bit of yellow or just a more warmer paint down the front. That's one thing I wish they included in here, but it's not a deal breaker. The colors that they've included, I'm really quite impressed with so far. Go through. That's just a bit of water coming through here, and you know, got maybe like a mound of sand or something like that. Yeah, and this is some bushes, bits of shrubs. Maybe I'll get a rock in here, another rock. Here, thinking where I can get that shadow in. Not to the right hand side, but should be alright. Maybe some shadows of the trees on the water, on the ground. You know, got maybe a tree up the back as well. That maybe use that to do a touch of negative painting as well. Put some indications of where I want the branches to be. I do want to add in a bit of sky there as well, just to see how that blue looks in the sky. Normally I do use a cerulean blue, but I'm going to try to limit my palette to just what I've got here, these 6 colors. So we'll see if it can handle something like this, and kind of an Australian landscape scene. Okay. And more trees. Pretty simple. Nothing too complicated here. I just want to make sure I've got some details for the branches, so to remind myself to go into those branches later. Could be a log or something on the ground. Okay. Want a bit of water there. Okay. So let's go. Start putting in a little bit of this blue for this. Okay. This is what is it? 161. Purple and blue. Purplish kind of blue, but look at that. You can dilute it out and actually goes super light. Like a lilac-y color. Sky. Just like that. Just a very light wash. And I find you can tell with good quality paints, when you dilute them, when you dilute the paint out, that it still retains vibrancy and it doesn't look chalky. Definitely say that for these. Have retained this really nice, fresh and fluffy sort of look. I'm just going around here into the sky, like that. Just a cool color for the sky. I'm hesitant to use any of these other colors. Maybe we could put in some clouds or something like that, just with this kind of darker purplish color, like kind of purple and black. Just maybe a touch of this. Let's see how that works. This sort of wet and wet, wet and wet effect in the sky. Softer. Something like that. And I am liking that. Looking good. Working my way down into the trees. I just want to start putting in a bit of, yeah, just a little bit of green in areas. I might go with this one here. This is 121. dark blue and green. So just a light wash of this green. And it's always a good idea to use a few different greens in here. So this one here is 172. That's blue and dark green. So you can actually water some of these out a touch. Just go in there. Just getting in a bit of these sort of trees in the distance, and trying to connect it up with the sky a little as well. One of the most important things to remember is that you want to make sure also that the you want to make sure that the trees are darker than the sky. So when I'm adding in a bit of paint for these out in the back, I just want to make sure that I'm comparing it to what I've painted into the sky, consciously making sure that it's darker. If you don't make it dark, it's just going to look like it's just not going to separate out from the sky. Okay, notice I've left a bit of white there as well. That's just for the tree trunks and stuff like that. Okay, come down here, you know, just separate a little bit of that out there. See if I can drop in some darker green in this section as well, just to let that granulate out. Maybe some of this, put in a bit of that pink. Kind of just a bit of warmth in there. What's this one? Purple and pink. The 152. Okay, interesting. Carry that down. Let's get some more here. And a bit more mixing in here as well. Notice this part of this part has already started to dry. Okay, and that's what you get when you wait too long, especially when you're using hot press paper. It does that. So I'm gonna hurry this up a little bit down here. Again, just leaving in a few of these bits and pieces, branches, bits of open areas. Noticing how I'm just mixing some of it right into the sky. Okay. Afterwards, what I can do is get in some more darkness. So I'm just mixing a bit of this blue green, these two different blue green sort of colors together. One of the amazing things about this set I'm starting to realize is just the huge amount of greens in here that you can mix. You can see that a little bit of granulation occurring on that right hand side as well, where the paints are just separating out, and you get a bit of texture, and that sort of effect, that textured kind of effect, is really important when you're painting landscapes. It just implies detail. This is the bit that I was a bit worried about. I do want to put in some kind of a yellowy color in here, and the closest thing I have to it really is just this purple and pink color, and I don't think that's really cut it out. I'm going to pick up a bit of yellow. This is just a bit of yellow ochre, and I'll just drop in a touch of that here, just to indicate some light. Touch of light here. That's one thing I do wish that they had in here, just a yellow, but that doesn't matter. We'll make do. Only bit of that, and maybe a little bit in the front, just a touch of this yellow ochre. There. Another option is you can also mix some of these colors up together and create a kind of a grayed down sort of tone. So maybe if I get a bit of this blue, a bit of this purple, reddish color, mix up a color that's a little more neutral, maybe something like that. Okay, and I can just mix that in a bit with that yellow. Okay, there. I'm going to carry this wash down a little bit here. This is going to be the river, and it's got this kind of greeny sort of color in the water, green and browny sort of tones, hues in here. So get that in quickly like that. Little bit here of some darkness, go with purple. A bit of that purple in here to create some shadow, maybe. That. You can also just leave bits of white on the paper to indicate highlights as well. I mean, you don't have to paint everything in. And what I'm actually trying to notice, the way I'm using the purples is it's almost as if it's similar to neutral tint. I'm just using it to darken down some of the other colors. Okay, and you know, it's also good to start putting perhaps a bit of it here in the distance near the riverbank. Some spots of darkness here and there, remembering to also preserve some of that yellow in there. Flick a bit of color in there to see what happens. Just a bit of water. Touch of, just flick a bit in there. And remember, this is on hot press paper. Well, good. Rid of that a bit. And this first wash, I always like to go very, very light and juicy. There's lots of water in this mix. Let's go downwards. Combine this on, join this on here. Okay. More green. Good. Okay. I think that's looking half decent for a quick first wash. So I'll probably let this one dry off. Okay, we'll go back in it and we'll get some more. So what I'll do actually first is if I can get in bits of feathering in of color. Okay, so here just gonna put in a few little blips of this darker purpley color, indicate some of these shrubs and stuff here. Okay, before that paint dries, just that, but you know, even in the branches up the top here, I can go pick up some of this darker green and drop that in as well. Just see how that sort of looks. I don't want to go overboard with this as well. Just got to be careful because, again, there's a lot of light in that background section. But I'm just trying to create a sort of blend of colors, joining up that background and the foreground slightly, and also kind of outline the riverbank a bit as well. Touch of darker paint near some parts of that riverbank, like here, can sometimes help to indicate that. You do see some of this stuff here in the foreground as well, just little bits of debris and stuff in here. While the paint's still wet, or not, you know, you could have bits of drier areas here as well. Good to just get some of that in. Okay. A bit more darkness in here. A bit more green. Okay. A bit more green, a bit more of this greeny color. There's 3 different greens in here, and when you mix them together, really just seems that you can get such a range of different greens, and they're just mixing around in there doing its own thing. But the idea is once you come back to it later and it's all dried, it's going to look really good. Fingers crossed. And with a lot of this wet and wet painting, you're trying to just facilitate what's happening, but we're not really trying to paint exactly what we see. We're just creating a little snapshot, and then we can add some details in later. Look here, I do see there's this rock as well, and might be an opportunity for me to actually get in part of that rock now, just with this brush, touch of it. That. A bit of shadow running towards the right or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Good. Layering is so important with watercolors because that's how you create detail. Without layer, without adding different layers, it's going to look very boring. So I'll leave this off to dry. All of the colors are just starting to mix together. So probably remember different colors that I talked about initially when I was out on palette. But this is now a bit of this purpley color, purple and black color. And I'm thinking perhaps I'll use some of that, get in some little like shrubs or some little bits of this kind of thing here in the foreground. Okay, bits and pieces. This is just an old round brush that I have. Look at that, it's just all over the place, but it works so well for this type of stuff. I'm just picking the color up almost straight with some a tiny bit of water mixed in there. Okay, so just a little bit of that water to get in the maximum amount of contrast here. This here is I've just got a bit of green now. Great thing when you're working with these sort of splayed brushes, they really do quite erratic things, which looks fantastic when you're doing these type of landscapes. And I'm also remembering to leave out some light areas here too. Let's go in, let's get in a bit more here. You know, these can turn into rocks as well. Just imagine light source coming from the left-hand side, so maybe casting a bit of light to that right-hand side. Let me use a bit of this other bluish color here. Can just get some potential shadows or something like that for rocks or that kind of thing here. And look, some of this stuff's not even included in the reference photo. Okay, but I'm just adding it in here, using my imagination. Okay, and notice that I've also kept a lot of the whites on the paper, just preserve some of that whites, and those actually help create a touch of light. Bit here, bit here. I think these were meant to be rocks here as well. Let's just let me just try to get that one in. There, this is gonna be like a larger rock there. Maybe another one here, like that. Shadow of that rock. This, there, something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Bit more of this paint. I'm gonna get some more water. Everything just starts to mix together at the end. But look at that, just some nice little brush strokes here, joining up these rocks a touch, and I'm just trying to get in a little bit of darkness behind this rock as well. Emphasize the edge of it. The light's kind of hitting an area. Good. Okay, have a look in the trees now. I'm gonna have to use a bit of this purplish color here to get in the, maybe a bit of purple and a touch of this red. Touch of blue here. Just trying to make a subdued down purple sort of color. It doesn't matter exactly what that color is, but I just want to create some small details for the tree. Might actually brush, this will make it easier. Okay, just to get in details of the branches. Okay. Another thing I've forgotten is just some shadows across the water too for the trees on the left hand side. So just a little bit of that running through the water. Certainly going to help. And just scumble that brush across. It's more subtle, that's better. Okay. More of this. Just trying to draw out some of the details on the trees over in the background. Sometimes what helps is also adding in a little bit more paint in areas to create, again, additional contrast, layers of trees. This could be another layer of tree there. There could be another one here as well, kind of behind. Yeah, just a bit more color. Yeah. Great thing about these old brushes is that they always serve a little purpose in the end. Get leaves in. It's a bit more convincing when you use brushes like that. And remember, this is really just a quick sketch, so especially on this paper, hot press paper, I'm really quite impressed that it's able to tolerate this many, you know, all this wet and wet work that I'm doing. Very difficult working on hot press paper, especially when you're beginning as an artist. I find that not as forgiving. Everything just appears kind of a bit sharper. Paints and the vibrancy, though, do have a crisp sort of feel to it, which is a bonus. Trying to add some more, little bit of darker leaves and stuff here. There. And maybe some other layer of trees here in front. There. Get in a few little bits of shrub or whatever here as well. Foreground, maybe up here. And there's really a lot I can do. But I don't want to spend all day on this. Certainly the paper is fantastic. It's holding up to multiple washes. You can still see the previous layers. Works just as well as any hot press cotton paper that I've used in the past. I don't often use hot press paper. I only use it when I'm doing portraits, but not even then these days. I tend to use cold press paper, but it's something different if you are looking to try out hot press paper. This stuff works pretty well. I know in terms of creating detailed sort of works, the hot press paper just allows you to work on a smoother surface. Troughs of the paper don't get in the way. Let's go really dark. I don't know. Let's just pick some paint straight off the palette, and let's just see what it does if I for example try to get in some branches or something like that coming in. Size a bit of that. Some branches. Dark. And that's something I find super important. Just having that the paint just has that versatility to get in all the super dark bits and pieces. Okay, I haven't had to go in to pick up any neutral tint. Bit over here. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it does help to have a bit over in the background and things as well, like, yeah. bank. Okay. Basic little landscape branches. You can see the paint does react quite well in terms of all the wet and wet effects. You know, you've got some wet and dry and stuff up here as well. So I want to try using some cold press paper and just have a look at how it reacts on cold press. Okay, so I've got a bit of cold press paper here. This is some 𝗢𝗙𝗙𝗜𝗓𝗔𝗟 cold press paper, and I've just got it leaning on just on a slight angle, maybe 10 degrees. That will encourage the water to flow downwards. And I'm just going to do something really simple. Okay, it's nothing much at all, just some shrubs here in the foreground. And maybe we have some larger ones coming through the center. This. There's some shrubs here. A bit of the sky around about there, maybe with the tree line all the way at the back. Okay, just some trees off in the distance here. I'm gonna get smaller off into the back distance like that. Could maybe just put in a lake or something here, just for the sake of it, to get in a kind of reflection of the sky. This could be like a lake, you know. There may be some rocks and stuff surrounding the lake too. Yeah, these can just be some trees and shrubs coming around the side. Maybe a larger tree here. Okay, larger sort of trees. Okay, I want to just test out the wet and wet effect on the paper, especially cold press. This is where it's going to matter. So a bit of sky. I'm going to pick up that same blue purpley sort of color. That is 161. Purple and blue, and might wash into the sky like this. I'll skip a few areas. Let's just skip something like this. Bit of sky. Let's go down the page. Good. I'm just just adding a little bit more concentration of paint at the top. I tend to do that. Landscapes, I just tend to make the top a little darker. Yeah, bring this down. That. Just lighten it down as we. This. Good. And how about a little cloud here with the shapes? Good. Make that. I don't want to make these clouds too sharp. So notice I'm always just kind of drying my brush a little bit, going back into it, coming back again, just readjusting while this paint is still wet. Okay. Good. I'm just going to go further down. We're going to use the 3 different greens here. Also a bit of this blue, purple and blue color as well. But just start putting in some of this green. And I do find that the greens are fairly muted. I have been in the past just using a lot of the Daniel Smith Undersea green, and it's kind of good now that I've got a few others that I can pick from. Go in. I've kind of gone away from using really, really vibrant pigments, I've just now started to use more of a muted palette with a lot of my work. Probably what will be good is, if they included an earth tone, earth hue in here as well, would have been helpful. An earth tone and a yellow. Of course, if you have those two, fantastic. Well, just mixing up a few different colors here. This is, of course, a lot of this greenish sort of color here in the back. Remembering to swap it around a little bit as well so that you have some different green hues, not all the same hue floating around. Oops, and I've just lost my brush. That's okay, it's come up again. Good. And I also just want to get a bit of that reflection of the skies. So if I can just drop in some of this bluish color here in the water, this lake there. If I can blend a bit of it onto the trees as well, that would be good, but I don't want all of it to sort of just blend in. See how we go. Okay. Try to use a bit of this pink sort of color here. I do think I'm gonna have to go back to that yellow. I need that yellow, and because having all these warmer, just having something really warm next to the coolness of blue, the purpley sort of colors, really helps to balance things out. So this can just be a bit of sand or something there. Okay. More tree stuff. Larger tree bushes here in the foreground. That. Okay. More of this green. Think and float further down the. And some of these darker bits, just mix up a bit of blue with a bit of green to create a darker blue, greeny sort of shape here, just for a larger tree. And why not try getting another one there and a smaller one here? Just increasing some of the contrast in this scene. And I'm finding, yeah, definitely this paint does go quite a long way. I'm still using the bits of paint that I've squeezed out initially. So important to be able to get these dark bits in here and also the lighter colors too. Love doing this. I love just playing around with this wet and wet color, and just do have a smaller fan here that I can muck around with as well. Get in some little more here, bit of blue here, green, yeah, surrounding the I'm gonna put some really dark. Let's see how dark we can get this up the mixing a lot of this purpley color up with the green and the blue. And that's really about the darkest that I can get it. I think I can go any further than that. But just a little bit of this down the bottom for some of these shrubs. Get a more grayish color, maybe. Some of this kind of reddish purpley sort of color. One thing I find is that when using fewer colors, really don't have to think as much in terms of what you need to mix up, which ones to choose from. I kind of just look at it as cool and warm. I do find in this set of colors, certainly get a lot more cooler range of colors, and that's why I had to supplement it. A bit of the yellow, actually. This is looking pretty all right so far. I just want to start placing in perhaps some sharper shapes, you know, that by twigs, leaves, that kind of thing. And to do that, I'm just picking up that darkest paint, really just that purpley black color, and seeing if I can just imply some bits and pieces of branches or something like that. And you can use your fingernail like I'm doing here. It does help a bit as well. Your tree there. Okay. Yeah. Little shrub, bits of, you know, shrubs and stuff like that as well. Could potentially just put here and imply extra detail. Darkness here in the background. There's a small rigger brush that helps. I don't know, I find that it really helps to get in this sense of detail. Little bits of detail and shrubs, bits of grass and stuff. Also the same reason why I use this fan brush from time to time. It just makes it easy to paint these little brush strokes, especially wet into. Use a larger brush, or the brush strokes are going to just be way too broad. This could almost be a shadow or something like that for these trees. Just trying to make sense of it as we paint. Shadow, another shadow here. I want to create extra darkness at the bottom, and some small details. Like here you can see there's like or something. Join some of this up, create some, you know, a sense of connectedness. Foreground, ground as well. It's important. Try to paint most of it wet into wet if possible, and supplement it in the end with some wet on dry. You know, you got this stuff like this as well. You can just use a little knife to just add in little highlights for like trees or twigs and stuff like that as well. So that's something like that. And you've actually got to wait till the paint to dry slightly, so that area is a little damp. Otherwise it doesn't work. But it just makes things look a little bit more three-dimensional when you have some of these little bits and pieces coming through like that. There. Rid of that. That's really blue, isn't it? Okay. Sometimes you do get these little reflections that travel down on the water like this, these vertical reflections. Thinking I'm probably getting us coming down through the water there, really. You know, for these trees in the background, again, this sort of stuff do by picking up a bit of this mop brush and a little round brush like this, and just spreading about some of this paint in a kind of loose fashion, and it just creates this sense of detail, perhaps for another layer of trees or something like that in front of the soft trees in the background. Put in maybe some birds. White mixed with yellow gouache. You can do stuff like this. Just drop a bit of that in here. Suddenly get a splash of interest. Well, tree. Oh, if you want to get in a bit more detail for some of the distance. Branches. Sky. You just feel that there's need for some sharpness. Some spots slightly kind of define what's in the background. Good. So, all in all, I'm pretty pleased with how these paints have turned out. The only thing I would say is, you know, definitely having your own yellow in there helps, because I found with the paintings, just not having that yellow, having that complementary, and just having that warmth in there was really lacking, and I just felt like I had to go and pick some of that up from the palette. So I think that's something that Paul Rubens should definitely include next time, in my opinion. Maybe swap out one of the greens. You know, that would be fantastic. You know, the paint, certainly you can see parts of it just granulate out in areas like here. It's not too pronounced though, but there's certainly a little bit of granulation. Even like here, you can see the blues start to dried a little bit funny with the kind of texture on it as well. I do like the way that the paints have mixed together. Very nice performance there with the wet on wet. Go have a look online through the link in the description. and I think it's a pretty good value for 6 different colors. Like I said, you add your own yellow to it, I think that would make it perfect. Some of the other swatches I've done, at the start as well. I've got this one here. Let me move this up. A sketch that I did here as well with the hot press pad. Certainly still needs a bit of work, but the paper quality is also pretty good. So check out the link if you're interested, and if you have any questions, just leave your questions in the comments, and I'll get back to you.